Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 12 of season 5 of Walking Dead called Try. And this is our penultimate episode before the 90-minute season finale. Um, and overall, this is for the most part a pretty decent episode, but it doesn't really feel like anything super exciting has been set up yet. I mean, I know they're going to have an extra 30 minutes to play around with in the finale, but really feels like there should have been like some serious threat that needed to be dealt with immediately when that episode starts, and we don't get that this episode, which is what I find very disappointing. Anyway, so let's just kind of get right into things. And you can interpret the title of this episode quite a few different ways, but I think this episode really is more about like who is genuinely trying to integrate into Alexandria and who isn't. And of course, we've seen that basically everybody who isn't Carol or Rick has been trying. Daryl, though, I'll grant, was kind of more of a neutral person there. He knew that Alexandria was, a real boon, but that he himself didn't quite fit in there. That's why he really gravitated towards the position of recruiter that Aaron offered him. So let's just kind of get right into talking about stuff. And we might as well start with Daryl since I mentioned him. So he and Aaron, they do spot the campfire of some people, so they know there are other people in the area. And then they find that body tied to the tree in that hasn't been fed on by the walkers. And interestingly enough, this is exactly what Carol threatened to do to Sam just a couple of episodes ago. And I find it strange though that apparently, like on this body, only the stomach was torn out. I mean, look at what happened when Aiden died. There was like tearing at his arms and his face and all this. So like maybe whoever this extremely unfortunate woman was, she was there and it was like only one walker that stumbled across her and decided I'm gonna go for the guts. I remember she's just starting to reanimate after Aaron and Daryl find her, so they know this is something that happened within like probably the last 12 hours. I forget exactly what the guy at the Center for Disease Control said, but between like what was the average time it took for someone to reanimate. The show's never been very consistent with that, to be perfectly honest. But the thing that really annoys me about that scene is Daryl's like going up there and starts touching the thing, even though it is given no sign that the body is given no sign that it acknowledges that they're there. So obviously it hasn't reanimated yet. So reanimation is imminent. Seriously, dude, stab that thing in the head before you touch it. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about the show is like people really, really do not take those precautions in order to protect themselves from being bit that they should. I mean, I know I've ranted about like wear some friggin' gloves before. But again, you have to make some concessions to the fact that these are actors who just don't want to sweat themselves to death. So, okay. Anyway, so this is clearly inching us forward on the whole Wolves storyline. Now, getting back to what's going on in Alexandria, we get to see Carl apparently taking the step towards having a little bit of young romance with Enid. Now, there's a girl in the comics about Carl's age. I don't remember what her name is. I don't think it's Enid, but I have a feeling that she might be being set up as a replacement for that character. Again, this isn't a character who's I remember terribly well. She just happened to have a small role in the most recent collection of the comics, which is why I remembered her. But in any case, Enid does make this really wonderful point of this is their world now. We're just living in it, and that's a very, very insightful comment for someone so young. And I just kind of enjoyed like her like screwing around with the walker and just showing that yeah, as messed up as the world is, there's still a place for young people to have a little bit of fun, even if this definition of fun involves dicking with zombies. Hey, you got to make your own fun in life, right? So, on a more serious note, going back to Alexandria, um, we start things off in a really crazy situation with Aiden's family, his mom, dad, and brother listening to his extraordinarily shitty mixtape. I mean, God, man, I mean, I feel bad for you for dying in such a terrible way, but dude, your taste in music sucked. And then Carol does like the most suburban thing ever and brings over a casserole. I mean, this is just so ridiculous. I mean, like, I don't think people even do this in real life. Well, they probably do, but I've never seen anybody do it. But it's like, oh, something bad's happened over with that family. Well, I guess I'll bring them a casserole because I don't know. It's just something people in some parts of America do. I've never understood that. Well, except for the idea that going over there to deliver said casserole kind of gives you an opportunity to get your foot in the door and snoop a little bit. It's boring out in suburbia. What can I say? And of course, Deanna just like leaves the thing on the doorstep and then burns the card. So clearly, she's not happy with Rick's people. But the weird thing is that except for really Sasha, as far as Deanna knows, though before Rick loses his friggin' mind, the only person who's really not done a very good job of assimilating is Sasha. Everybody else has been making a genuine effort. I mean, Abraham was promoted to being in charge of that work crew. Rick and Michonne have become cops. You know, it took Daryl a little while to figure out his place, but he's become a recruiter. Now there's this whole situation with Glenn and all that, and, you know, Aiden getting killed, but you know, of course, Noah also died. So this is kind of really at the crux of what's going on there. Like, where exactly is the line between being civilized people and being people who can survive in this world? And Deanna is no fool, but she really doesn't understand just how bad things are out there. And Rick does, but he's too quick to resort to violence. He's lost a lot of what it makes to be a civilized person. Glenn is the one who's really right on the sweet spot, and even puts it very well. It's like, we can teach these people how to survive. And when he confronts Nicholas over it, Nicholas is all like, "Hey man," and he says to him like, "Hey, you don't go out there anymore." And this is after they've both been forbidden from going out by Deanna, if I remember correctly. And Nicholas is like, "Hey, are you threatening me?" And Glenn is like, "No, I'm saving you." And you know, just the whole thing there between Glenn and Nicholas, where Nicholas, like, Glenn confronts him, is like, "Hey dude, you lied," and Nicholas basically says like, "Hey, I've sacrificed more for this community than you can imagine." Basically, Nicholas is going like, "You know what, after everything I've done for this community, I've earned a lie in order to save my own ass." And yeah, that's pretty bullshit. And then there's the whole thing that Nicholas is the one that has Rick's gun. So I'm really curious to find out just exactly how he even knew that was there in the first place. You know, like, is he like some sort of plant for the wolves or something like that? We don't know. But I have a feeling another confrontation between Glenn and Nicholas is not too far down the line. Let's see here. What else do we have to talk about? Oh yeah, since I mentioned Sasha, let's talk about her really briefly. And honestly, Sasha was kind of, I think, the least interesting person this episode. It's just more a case of Sasha is losing her damn mind, and Michonne and Rosita go out there and try and talk a little sense into her, and maybe they succeed a little bit. If nothing else, it gave Rosita a chance to go out there and kick some ass, which is good because Rosita's really kind of been on the back burner a lot ever since she was introduced. I mean, she's had her moments here and there, but she's never really been the focus of very much, which is unfortunate because she is a good, solid character. But here we get to see Michonne also sort of flashing back to when she was just sort of like zombie killing katana maniac, and she even sort of puts it when she has that feeling come back to her. I feel like I've been asleep. So again, Michonne is somebody who's really struggling to find that nice sweet spot between survival and civilization. And then Sasha kind of admits like her telling Noah that he wouldn't survive is one of the things that's really been eating at her. And it's hard not to blame her for that. I mean, we've all said something nasty to somebody and then seriously regretted it later, especially if, you know, tragedy befell that person before we had the chance to apologize or take it back. But the thing is, though, Noah dying really wasn't Noah's fault. He died because of Nicholas, not through any mistakes that he made. but I suppose under the circumstances that's pretty cold comfort. But still, Sasha needs to get her head out of her ass, and that whole screaming like I didn't need help when she was clearly about to be eaten by a zombie is seriously, no, come on, Sasha, wake up. Nothing hugely particular to say about Carol this episode. Just sort of her being, very insistent that killing Pete was the only way to deal with the situation. But of course, this is understandable given that Carol's perspective also is that if the walkers hadn't killed Ed, that she wouldn't have survived this long. And of course, Rick is like, "Nah, man, you're strong. You'd have made it." And that's honestly that's an academic question, but it is interesting to see their differing points of view on that. And in all fairness to Carol, she's been kind of unnecessarily mean lately, but it was nice to see her not push Sam away when he hugged her. Of course, he was clutching onto her because he was watching his father and another guy trying to beat each other to death. So, yeah, I mean, Carol's been a little bit shit lately, but she's not that bad. And this, of course, brings us to the whole situation with Rick versus Pete, with Jesse in the middle. And one, you'd think that an experienced cop like Rick would know, I'm going into a volatile situation, maybe I should bring my partner with me. But given the complicating factor of his feelings for Jesse, I can kind of understand why he might not want to do that. And he even flat out says to her that he wouldn't do this for anyone else, thus making it clear that yes, he does have feelings for Jesse. And she acknowledges this. She realizes, like, yeah, Rick's right, I need to get out of here. And then of course Pete shows up and everything goes to hell. And I love the fact that Rick clearly underestimated just how tough it would be to take Pete down. And this of course leads to the it's getting pretty windy out there. I don't know if you guys heard that, but anyway, this leads to them just like Pete getting thrown to a window and the two of them brawling in the streets. And I'm kind of really wondering a lot about that whole situation with Pete, because before this all goes down, Rick goes and he talks to Deanna about what's going on, and she says like, "Oh God, I kind of hope that he would stop doing that." And Rick is understandably mad as hell that Deanna knew about this situation and didn't do anything about it. So my question though is, did Pete know that Deanna knew what was going on? I mean, did she say like, "Hey Pete, I know what you're doing to your wife, and if you don't stop, there are going to be some consequences to this"? Because it sounds like Deanna just like, "Oh, Pete's hitting his wife. Well, we really need him because he's a doctor, so I'm just going to hope that he stops on his own. And I'm not even going to let Pete know that I know what he's been doing." Because I have a feeling that if Pete had been confronted with like, "Hey, I know what you're doing. I'm going to make sure other people know what it is that you're doing. Or at least I'm going to have people keep an eye on you to make sure you're not hurting your wife and your son. And if you do, then there's going to be some serious consequences for that." I mean, Deanna, in all fairness, does say like, "Okay, we might have to look at exiling Pete." And of course, Rick does not consider that to be anything more than a half measure at best. But, basically, nothing short of putting a bullet in Pete is going to satisfy Rick. And let's keep in mind, his motivations are not entirely selfless here. There's more than a little bit of Shane going on in this situation. Of course, Rick does nothing to help his case when he's like beating Pete in the street and then starts waving around his gun in the air, pointing it in the direction of innocent bystanders while rambling on about life and death and like, "I won't let you." And then Michonne sneaks up behind him and knocks him in the head. I mean, wow, Rick. Covered in blood, ranting and waving around a gun is not the way to help your case. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see just how all of this plays out. And I have a feeling that like the trial of Rick Grimes or whatever is going to be interrupted by an attack by the wolves. And it's sort of going to be in surviving that attack that the community realizes, okay, we do need to find this balance. We do need to listen to what Rick and his people have to say about surviving in this world, and that Rick and the gang have to accept that, hey, there's a difference between the world inside the walls and there's a difference and outside the walls, I guess is a good way to put it. So with that, I'm going to call it here, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.